How are you doing?
Good. How are
Do you have travel plans?
I'm just going to DC for mine.
It's not just straight. Yeah.
To go where? Italy in September. Well, we're supposed to be going to Uganda. Was planned 2 years ago. 2 years ago? 3 years ago? I forget.
Yeah.
Maybe it was
Just got tired of having people throw out.
because we got it in October and it was supposed to be the next October.
So that was last October?
No,
2 October.
yeah. And it keeps getting postponed, so we'll see.
Is it a group?
Yeah, there's a friend of mine that does these trips to see the grade 8.
So what month?
To be October. End of
Like,
October.
so see, that's still.
Yeah.
Hello, 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 hello. Is that good? This works okay? Sound good? Sound good? Sound good? Okay. Yeah? You can hear me? Great. Thank you. Now. Oh, right, now that works. I saw some thumbs up, so I thought it was working. Luckily, I have a loud voice, so hopefully you already heard me. My name is Kirsten Hunter. I'm the director of Lifespan Ministries here at South Church. I have a couple announcements for us before we start this morning. One of them is about our shared ministry program. At South Church, we have 5 associate programs that each are groups of church members who help lead different areas of the ministries of this congregation. And those associate programs are all connected by a team called the Shared Ministry Team, and right now we are recruiting. These are really great places for you to find a deeper connection to different areas of ministry: worship, learning, pastoral care, fellowship, and social justice are the 5 group ministries. So if you have a desire to kind of dig into any one of those things and are someone who would be willing to give your time, I'd encourage you to find either Laura Montville or Martha Cunningham, who are going to, there's Martha standing right in the center aisle, looking beautiful. They will be tabling after service this morning, so please find them and chat if you're curious about associate programs and maybe giving some time to that endeavor. Very valuable experience. Also, if you are relatively new or have never done the Journey to Membership class at South Church, we are starting another round of the Journey to Membership class. Again, a really excellent way to kind of dig in and learn a little bit more about what our congregation is about and learn a little more about Unitarian Universalism in general. That program is starting virtually. We're doing it mostly on Zoom again this spring on March 20th, and you can learn more about that in your order of service or email fellowship@southchurch-uu.org. And finally, beginning this coming Friday night, February 25th, our fellowship associates, one of those associate programs, are hosting an online social hour for people to talk, meet, say hello. Again, you can check your order of service for more information about that, but if you're looking for a way to connect in a pretty casual way, Friday night might be just the thing. So, thank you for being here. Welcome. Have a wonderful day.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
As we light our chalice here, we encourage you to light yours in your spaces as well. These are the words of Gordon McKeeman. Deep calls unto deep, joy calls unto joy, light calls unto light. Let the kindling of this flame rekindle in us the inner light of love, of peace, of hope. And as one flame lights another, nor grows the less, we pledge ourselves to be bearers of the light wherever we are. Please join me now as you're able and recite the mission statement that's found in your order of service or will appear on your screen. At South Church, we nurture spiritual growth through worship, learning, and community. We celebrate the worth and dignity of all people and inspire one another to act on our faith in the larger community. You may be seated. Did you ever notice that the mission statement that we just finished reciting kind of goes like this? At South Church, blah, 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 blah. Community, blah, 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 blah. All people, more words, larger community. Thanks to nearly 2 years of COVID and an increasing allergy to world and national news, I have become increasingly comfortable with the contraction of my world. Being home more, seeing fewer people, interacting less. Sometimes I feel the constraint of this, but the longer it's dragged on, the more content I've been to have smaller and smaller circles. A gift of this is the time spent alone, which has led to starting to work on setting aside some habits that don't serve that well and cultivating others that do. And sometimes this feels incredibly selfish, especially in light of the aforesaid world and national news, etc. But even though I tend to see myself as a separate and unique being, it is entirely possible that this is not really true. We are all so very interconnected with each other and with all of the life around us that there's very little, I think, that's truly separate in how the life that is manifesting itself in the particular package I call me is all that different from the life that is manifesting itself in many other packages. So if that's the case, then whatever I do creates ripples and connections in other lives, in other life, for better or for worse. I sometimes go to the winter markets, and when I do that, I tend to buy a dozen eggs from my farmer friend Susan, because they are delicious. And that egg money is going to a person I know. She cares for her animals, she cares for her land, she takes care of her aged mother and her young grandchildren. We smile and chat for a couple of minutes, and I think we're both uplifted by that, those few minutes of camaraderie. And maybe that benefits the next people we encounter that day. And what would be the impact of just picking up the eggs at the supermarket? So I suspect that even, or maybe especially in this long period of more isolated existence, every connection and every choice we make sends energy outward among other lives, which in turn informs their connections and choices. And on it goes from our immediate communities into the larger community. Pema Chodron says it a lot better. She says, "We don't set out to save the world. We set out to wonder how other people are doing and reflect on how our actions affect other people's hearts." Our opening hymn this morning is number 168. The choir is going to sing it for us, but you are invited to stand, read along, and hum to your heart's content.
Lord,
to invite anyone who would like to hear the story from closer up is welcome to do so. No pressure, but you're welcome. I'm going to tell a story this morning that's a story about history. Specifically, come on up. You're good. Come on up, love. Specifically about the history of our religion, Unitarian Universalism, and even more specifically, a piece of history that's connected with Unitarians. And I wanted to start by just checking to make sure people know what's a Unitarian. And this is kind of a trick question because at South Church we are a Unitarian Universalist church, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are Unitarians, which is super weird. So does anyone know what's a Unitarian? And it's okay if you have a guess and you're not sure if it's right. Anyone have a guess? Do you have a guess, Sasha? Any guess? Okay. So it's good to know this before I tell the story. A Unitarian, Unitarian Universalists, our religion, the religion of this congregation, grew out of Christianity. It no longer is just a Christian religion, although some of us in this room might be Christians. But there are people in this room who do not identify as Christians. There are people in this room who don't believe in God. And that's okay. Our religion welcomes people who have all kinds of different religious beliefs. But our religion grew out of two versions of Christianity, Unitarians and Universalists. Those were two different, and still are, two different ways of practicing Christianity. And Unitarians were unique. They kind of came to shape during a time called the Protestant Reformation. I'm going to tell you another history thing about that in a second. But they came to shape because they did not believe that God was a Trinity. And that, back then, was a really big deal. Not believing that God was the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit was heresy. People didn't say that. And if you said that, people would get very upset. Sasha? A Trinity is thinking of God as three different people. So some people believe that Jesus is the Son of God, but is God. Some people don't believe that, right? This is all very confusing. Lots of different beliefs. But Unitarians said, you know what, we don't believe, when you describe God in this way, we don't believe that that description is accurate. We think God is one. That's Unitarian, as opposed to a Trinitarian, okay? So, everyone learned something already, I think. So this story is about a Unitarian king, which, by the way, I think there was only one of ever. And this person lived in a place called Transylvania. Do you know that there is a place called Transylvania? There is. And in Transylvania, there are a lot of Unitarians. And that is because of actually two people that are in my story this morning. And my story is specifically about this cool thing that happened right around this time of year in 1558, part of why I have my paper here. I think it's 1568. Way back, 450 plus years ago, there was something that happened called the Edict of Torda. And that's the story I'm going to tell you today. Happy Edict of Torda time. Okay, so this Unitarian king became king when he was a baby, which is crazy. And he actually then lost his rule because he was a baby. And other kings in the area kind of took his power from him. He wasn't really ready to be a king, because really, babies aren't the best people to be kings. They're great, I love babies, not the best kings, yes.
If a king was a baby, then all of the laws would be goo goo gaga.
If a king was a baby, all of the laws would be goo goo gaga. You're right. So, this king's name was John Sigismund Zapolya. King John, we're going to call him. And King John was born, his father died right as he was born, and that's how he became king, because that was kind of the tradition, was the king got passed down from father to son. So he became king as a baby, had to stop being king for a while because he was a baby, but came back into his kingdom, into rule in Transylvania when he was about 19 years old. And this is where the Protestant Reformation comes in. Okay, whew. We're learning a lot of history today. The Protestant Reformation is really cool and crazy. It's a time in Europe when religion was changing shape in all kinds of ways. And there is a specific reason that was happening. And actually, I think where we're living right now in time, right now, is kind of similar in some ways to what was happening back then. Because the Protestant Reformation, in part, happened because of human invention. We invented something way back then, actually in the late 1400s, called the printing press. And before the printing press existed, books were hard to come by, and most people weren't even able to read a book if they got it because it was usually written in Latin, which means most people could only take the word of someone else about what it said in the books. And in church, they mostly took the word of what the minister said or the preacher said, because that preacher was able to read the Latin in the Bible and tell it to them. When the printing press happened, all of a sudden, people could write in their own languages, in German or English or Spanish, and they could print it. So you could print up a flyer for a party you were having and pass it out. I didn't really do that probably as much, but they certainly printed up their opinions about things, and they put them places, and they spread it around. And all of a sudden, people were communicating in a totally new way. Has that happened more recently, where we started communicating in new ways? Can you think of a way that changed? Social media, the internet. When I was a kid, we didn't have the internet. I know that's hard to imagine for kids now, but it's true. And so I couldn't have told my mom, hey, turn on your YouTube and watch, I'm telling a story right now. I would have had to call her, and there was a time when we didn't have a phone, right? So when communication changes, the way we live changes. The Protestant Reformation happened, communication changed. People started saying, I can read this book myself, or I can write it in a different language. I could write this Bible in English, and then other people can read it. And then people started saying, wait a minute, I don't agree with what you think this says. I think it says something different. And all of a sudden, new religions started forming. But also, people started fighting a lot, because when you have different opinions, sometimes you fight. It's kind of a bummer, but it's true. People like to be right? And a lot of times when people with power fight, it turns into war. And that is a super sad thing to watch, because war is destructive and it hurts everyone, right? So back to our king, King John, the only Unitarian king ever to walk the planets. He had a friend named Francis David, who was his preacher. And Francis David was the Unitarian. That's why King John was a Unitarian, because Francis David was a very compelling Unitarian. And Francis David and King John hosted some debates amongst the different churches that lived in their area, hosted those preachers to come and talk with each other and discuss, because they were trying to find a way for people to live at peace, stop fighting, stop the wars. And so they had a series of conversations with preachers from all different kinds of religions. There was, Lutheran, Protestant, Greek Orthodox, Calvinist. I think that might be right. Maybe even, what's that? Roman Catholic, probably, if they came. I don't know if they came. I bet they came. And so they all had these conversations, and at the end of these conversations, King John of Transylvania issued the Edict of Torda. He proclaimed, and this isn't an exact quote, but he proclaimed that every preacher should be able to preach and explain the gospel as they understand it, and that no one should be reviled for their religion by anyone else. And, he said, something to the extent of, we need not think alike to love alike. And that happening in 1568 is a big seed for why we are sitting here today, which is kind of crazy and really cool. Now, I want to say just a couple more things before we're done. The history lesson is almost over in case it's not your favorite kind of lesson. They were not perfect, and I suspect if we invited King John and Francis David to come hang out, we might not find them to be the most progressively thinking people now. I don't suspect that they meant to include people that don't believe in God when they were talking about this. And I don't suspect that they really meant to include even all kinds of different religions. They were really speaking specifically within Christianity. And that actually is a good thing to realize for a couple reasons, because when we talk about widening the circle, when we talk about growing and opening our heart to new understanding and welcoming new thinking, we have to think about the fact that even if we're doing a good job, there will be more to learn later. It doesn't stop. And so what they started to think about back then, which I think is pretty true, we need not think alike to love alike. That's an important thing to realize. It's equally important that we don't still limit that idea the way that they did when they first thought it. We keep widening the circle. And in doing that, we keep growing and finding new ways to communicate and finding new inventions and living into a new world. So, happy anniversary of the Edict of Torda, everyone. And now I think we'll hum our children down to some programming. Thank you.
I've been educated. It's now time for our morning offering, time for us to help support all the good work and good people of this church. There are many ways to give, both of your treasure as well as of your time and talents. And I will say that it has been my great privilege to be the chair of the annual budget campaign for the last couple of years, working with an amazing team to raise the funds necessary for our budget for each subsequent year. As of this morning, we are about $12,000 short of the $525,000 goal we set, and that is the figure that we agreed to budget for the coming year. We knew going into the annual meeting that if all of the 250 or so families who pledged for next year would up their pledge by $2 a week or $100 a year, that we would make up that shortfall. So far, 25 families have done that out of the 250, so that's where we are. You can still do something about that. On Sunday mornings, our shared plate offering is important because we act on our faith in the larger community. And during the month of February, our shared plate recipient is the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire, our friend and our neighbor. Please give as you are able. The morning offering will now be gratefully received.
Everyone. It is so wonderful to see people who have not been to church for a very, very long time, new faces and people who have joined us this morning. Let us give thanks for that. Thanks for seeing everyone. What a blessing. And let us have a moment of prayerful reflection as we think about this space, as we think about our lives, as we think about the gloriousness of the world that is around us. It is easy sometimes to get weighed down with concerns, and there are many, both personally and throughout the world. And it is easy sometimes to feel lost and in pain. And yet we come together to create a place where we can feel both our pain and our losses and experience our joys and all the growth and possibilities that are around us. So let us breathe in the love that is in this place. And let us breathe out any concerns and cares. Let us breathe in the power of history and heritage and story and song, and breathe out any concerns. Let us breathe in goodness and joy, and breathe out any concerns that you are carrying here with you, because we are listening to you. We want to know what's in your hearts. And so I invite anyone who has a care or concern to write it in the chat. And those of you who wish to come forward and light candles of joy or concern in silence, to come forward now, doing that, knowing you're held in our hearts. Please come forward as you are so moved. And don't hesitate to let a pastoral care person know that you have a need. for healing, for hope, for love, for caring. May it be so. I found out that I am one of approximately 7.9 billion people. That was the figure in October 2021. It's probably closer to 8.9 today, but who's counting, right? But if this is accurate, then I am just a smidgen, a mite, a tiny little speck, a minuscule part of the whole wide universe. Yet, on the other hand, the idea of the Buddhist probability of me being born is 1 in 400 trillion. 1 in 400 trillion. Wow, give or take a few trillion, right? Now, in my mind and heart of hearts, that means that I'm not just a little speck, but valued, intended to exist, and meant to be here. And if that's the case, then I best do something with my life that connects me with all others, my ancestors, you and your ancestors, those near to me and those very, very far away, those who I know and put and allow into my and bring into my circle, and those who I would like to widen my circle to include, and those who I would like to have their circle widened enough to contain me. Now, I ask you seriously, if those are the odds, both in the magnitude of numbers that inhabit the world, and as one person with those incredible odds of ever being born, that's a strange mixture, isn't it? That's a strange mixture. Incredibly powerful mix of being really crucial and really inconsequential. The poet Rosemary Watola Trama wrote, "We belong to the grand communion. We are the dust, the hopes, the dust that dances in the light. With all are the dust that makes the world." What a lovely image. It says it so much better and graciously than I can. And I want to say it straight. We belong. We are here. We are part of the entire whole, and it is a universe of others who have just the same odds as we do of being here. And therefore, we really are in this incredibly interconnected web of existence. And the universe is an enormous, interwoven, wide web. Even if I can't quite grasp that concept, that immense universal connection, we are one. We are one. And as one, it's incumbent on us to widen our circle, to learn about that universal connection, to experience it, to understand it. And I think that maybe the development of our empathy muscle may be one of the first steps to learn how to feel at one with the universe. And developing that empathy muscle can help us to enter and be in relationship and identify with the other, those different than us, those who see, hear, experience the world differently. My hope, my dream is that by exploring issues such as widening the circle of our existence and by practicing deep empathy, by trying deep listening with someone who experiences life different than we do, by feeling both the implausibility of our existence and the incredible significance that we do exist, then maybe with humble hearts and open curiosity, we can be about building a beloved community. And I would propose that this is one of the primary purposes of Unitarian Universalism and a task of this religious community in particular. I quote from an author, Angel Koidoya Williams Sensei. It is the community's job to figure out how we can stretch into so-called margins and then broaden our understanding and history to be inclusive. Inclusivity is not how do we make you a part of what we are, but how do we become more of what and who you are. Now, I'm going to invite you here in the sanctuary and those at home to think of who you connect with beyond your immediate family. Think about an average day. Who do you interact with? Is this circle large? Is it restricted? Are you happy with the connections? And conversely, are you missing some connections? What are those, and what would it take to develop them? The past 2 years of COVID has led many of us to have to shrink the size of our circles. And just through that need to have to stay safe and protect ourselves and our families, we have shrunk the size of our circle of contact. It has been, and still is, a very hard time. It's stressful, anxiety-provoking, a lot of unknown, and having to pivot in so many ways, and that can take a toll on our hearts, our minds, and our spiritual well-being. And sometimes when that happens, we contract so much. So maybe we need to think about how to spread the circle of concern out a little bit. Now, you may have remembered that I mentioned before, one of the traits I particularly love about my mother, now that she's dead, and it really, really was not something that I at all enjoyed when she was living, because especially when I was out in public with her when I was 10 or 11, my mother would engage people in conversations, no matter where we were, who they were, no matter what, didn't matter, size, clothes, language. If it was a language she didn't understand or a dialect she didn't understand, she'd make me stand there and listen. No. She had a lot of friends. She listened, she connected. I remember that our Christmas card list that I had to write out, right? Had a lot of friends, and it was all over the continent. I was realizing when I was thinking about this, she would love Zoom. She would, because she could connect with people everywhere. So I'm using the example of my mother, and I want you to not be that 10-year-old who doesn't like standing there, but I want you to turn to the person next to you and those at home, right in the chat too. Think about who you interact with beyond your family, maybe, in an average day. Share some of your thoughts with one another. And who's missing from your circle? And who's there? Who do you interact with? Who's in your circle? So, take some time. So how many of you are like my mother? Laurie and I were talking, and we were talking about the fact that my mother did work out of the home, too. So it was just unique to her personality, and I think maybe the culture that we grew up in. But she worked out of the home. She was a registered nurse, and she was a director of nursing at a facility for the elderly population. And so it was. We were talking about, Laurie and I were talking about that maybe it's a trait that we get more comfortable as we get more comfortable with ourselves and or risk a little bit. And so it seems to me a really good way to think about how can we widen our circle and who else can we draw in and who else can we become a part of their life by doing that as well. That's a little bit about a community within a community. So what's missing in your communities? We talked earlier about the associate groups, and Laura and Marty are going to be out there tabling and talking a little bit about shared group ministry. And we have been doing testimonials for you to get a chance to experience a little bit what that is like to be part of a shared group ministry. And it's a great way to build another community, to explore what your passions and your interests are and build connections. How many of you attend South Church's book club? Or book clubs at your local libraries, right? And then, the Black Heritage Trail. What did we hear last week? 40%, 40 members from here. Huge number of our congregation members are connected to there. That's a community in and of itself that you can become a part of. How about the Kittery Historical Society? Right? Exeter, Dover, Portsmouth Historical Society is a great way to build connections, learn history, widen your circle. Efforts at reducing homelessness, working with displaced families. There's lots and lots of ways to get connected. And as we're shifting a little bit in this, I don't want to call it a post-COVID world, but as we're shifting just a tiny bit, the opportunities to get connected are becoming a little bit more available to you. And the board and the staff really want to help make ways for you to feel that your spirit's taken care of and that you're feeling connected and that those circles are widened as much as they possibly can. So I appreciate all the connections that I have, and I'm always surprised at thinking about, oh yeah, that's another connection. Bringing the puppy for puppy training, actually human training, but they call it puppy training. And they're a great group of people that I'm getting to know now. Just one other little way to get connected. So we're almost at the end of our time together, but certainly not at our time of exploration of this topic. And what I want you to do is to make connection with everyone in here. I want you to take a moment and look around you before I close and nod or wink or wave to your neighbor, your fellow church attendee. And if you're comfortable, I urge you to stand up, turn around, and wave to those, hello, watching the cameras over here. Say, hi, everybody. We see you. So let us be about building this beloved community. Let us be about widening the circle, learning about one another, and sharing in all the ways that we possibly ever can. We would now have a final hymn, We Would Be One. I invite you to stand and engage by humming or however you are comfortable.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And I close with words from the Tiwa Indians of North America in our hymnal. O our mother, the earth, O our father, the sky, your children are we, and with tired backs we bring you the gifts you love. And then weave for us a garment of brightness. May the warp be the white light of morning, and may the weft be the red light of evening, and may the fringes be the falling rain. May the border be the standing rainbow, and thus weave for us a garment of brightness, that we may walk fittingly where birds sing, that we may walk fittingly where grass is green. O our mother, the earth, O our father, the sky. And I add, go in peace, peace be with you. Amen.